Hey guys, really quick, for the entire month of June at Fantasy Sabers, we're giving away the Negotiator Deluxe Edition with every Saber order. This is a 1 month only sale, so don't miss out. What if Palpatine found Anakin on Tatooine? Let's start the story in the year 38 BBY. Palpatine was meditating in his home on Coruscant, his master Plagueis, deep into his experiments on Sojourn. Palpatine often did this late at night. He no longer needed much sleep, a few hours a week would suffice. He had grown past those limitations that the Jedi were beholden to. He would use this time to recoup his energy and meditate in the Force, attempting to see the future, to see how he and his master's plans would unfold, how they would rule the galaxy together. The Force would sometimes grant him images, but often it was quiet. However, this time was different. After Palpatine was deep in his meditation, he was thrust into a deep vision, seeing his master and himself at their laboratory on Sojourn, conducting a ritual. Palpatine realized it was the same ritual he and Plagueis conducted 3 years ago when they attempted to create life through the Force, taking Darth Venemous's life, Darth Tenebrous' second apprentice. He then hears a scream, unlike any he has before. The scream not only had a voice, but it had power. It had the Force. Could the Force have screamed as a result of their ritual? Next, he only saw flashes, a woman with black hair, a desert planet, Jabba the Hutt. And then they stopped. As a whole, the vision lasted 2 seconds, and it seemed that's all he would be granted. Palpatine attempted to put the pieces together. The grand experiment, a desert planet with Jabba the Hutt, no doubt Tatooine. What does this all mean? One thing was for certain, Palpatine wasn't foolish enough to ignore a vision from the Force, and the next day, he clears his schedule and flew to Tatooine. He lands his ship on the outskirts of Mos Espa and makes his way into the city. He uses the Force to guide him and feels an unfamiliar presence in the Force. He goes down street after street, feeling the Force grow stronger until he notices it's converging on a building. The streets were busy. It was evening now, and he knocked on the door to the building he knew would hold the answers to his questions. The door slid open, and none other than the woman from the visions answers. Palpatine introduced himself as a senator from the Republic and asked if he may come in. Shmi obliged, and Palpatine enters and looks around. It was small, not much to live by, but most importantly, was the other human being in the house. A young baby boy, who couldn't be more than 3 years old, was sitting at the dinner table. Shmi tells Palpatine she's just finished making dinner if he would like some, and of course he accepts. Palpatine sits down at the table and starts asking Shmi questions about her life. This is where Palpatine learns that Shmi is a slave, and Anakin will grow to be one as well, having already been sold to Gardula the Hutt. Palpatine focuses on the boy Anakin, and through the Force, can tell he is the epicenter of his vision. The Force is radiating from him, like nothing he has ever felt before. Towards the end of their conversation, Shmi asks Palpatine why a representative of the Republic Senate is all the way out here on Tatooine. Palpatine thinks on how to progress from here, that he's been sent here from the Republic to bring human children out of slavery and into a better life, that the Republic cannot officially act in areas outside of its jurisdiction, but can nonetheless make smaller efforts to make necessary change. Palpatine was good, a cunning manipulator. Shmi thought about it. She always dreamed of a better life for Anakin, one she knew she could never provide. Palpatine gives her the night to think about it, meanwhile discreetly taking a blood sample. Back at his ship, he runs a midichlorian count, over 20,000, more than him and his master, maybe the most ever. Palpatine couldn't believe it. He must have this boy, whether Shmi lets him or not. However, the next day, when he went back to their home, Shmi agreed to give Palpatine Anakin, that she wants him to live a better and more fulfilling life. Palpatine thanks Shmi and promises her that he can make this happen, and that part of the process will involve Anakin reaching out to Shmi when he's 12 years old, something Shmi wanted very much. However, of course, Palpatine was only lying. Palpatine takes 3-year-old Anakin back to his ship and heads back to Coruscant. Whilst in hyperspace, Palpatine thinks on where to go from here. He acted on impulse to get the boy, feeling the urgency through the Force, but didn't really have a plan from here. Instinctively, he should have told his master, but he didn't, and wondered why that was. He looks at his screen, showing the security recording of Anakin in his room, playing with his droids, and realizes the Force may have given Anakin to him as an opportunity, a gift to allow him to undermine his master, and together progressed the grand plan of the Sith. He believed it was a sign to Palpatine that the Force was backing him, that it wanted him to win in his fight against the Jedi. He takes Anakin back to Coruscant and sets him up in the Sith hideout in the industrial region of Coruscant for the time being. Meanwhile, Plagueis was on sojourn with his experiments most of the time, something Palpatine had started to distaste, feeling his master lacked motivation for the grand plan, that his obsession with the midichlorians has blinded him from their true purpose in the Force. Ever since Plagueis was injured by the Miladian assassins, ordered by the Grand Protectorate, his goals have somewhat changed, and Palpatine was sick of it. The first thing he did with Anakin's training was expose his mind to the dark side, erase the memory of his mother Shmi, using Sith memory manipulation. Palpatine learned this from the readings of Darth Kratos, an expert in the field. He uses a mixture of mind control, Force suggestion, and isolation to cloud and overwrite Anakin's earliest memories of his mother. He considered killing her or staging a death, but the Force had funny ways of acting, and likely could show Anakin visions of what had happened if he ever traveled back to Tatooine. Having overwritten his memories, the alchemy could be undone in the future, but likely would not have any implications on Palpatine, likely blamed on aging or the dark side changing him. For the time being, as Anakin is 3 years old, he enrolls him in a local preschool. Palpatine believes a semblance of normal growth would be good. He doesn't want to isolate Anakin, as that will no doubt inhibit him in the future. He needs Anakin to live, to experience emotions, and impose himself as the father/authority figure in Anakin's life, and when he's 6, he will begin his training. Meanwhile, Palpatine and Plagueis continue to further their plans, ordering Maul around, whom he's also training in his spare time. Having Maul around will also protect Anakin. If Plagueis gets any whiff that he's being betrayed by Palpatine, he can pin it on Maul and execute him if necessary to keep Plagueis' trust, until of course he has no further use for him. Palpatine starts Anakin's training. He sets up a future influential program, a glorified school in the Senate Congregate, advertised as a program for the future leaders of the galaxy, essentially used for politicians and financially influential beings to send their children to. But ultimately, it was advised for Anakin to stay close to Palpatine. This means he would spend most of his days in the Senate building and offices during school hours, and after hours will come back to his home in the industrial region, where Palpatine has easy access route through 500 Republica, where Anakin is taught the tenets of the dark side. Palpatine starts with combat training, bare hands at first, upgraded to training sabers, forced to fight droids and animals alike. Pain was not avoided, it was a tool, and Palpatine often proclaimed that pain teaches and strengthens. He started studying early Force manipulation, starting with the basics, telekinesis, Force choke, Force push. Palpatine would emphasize that Anakin's power comes from his anger and desire for more. Every training session would end with the lesson, your anger gives you power. The ideological indoctrination was more intense. Peace is a lie, there is only passion. Anakin meditated on this together with Palpatine, who taught Anakin that mercy was weakness, and Palpatine started to put Anakin in situations where he must betray, hurt, or abandon others. He engineered events at Anakin's school. There was an opportunity for someone to become the leader of their class, something Anakin wanted immensely, but Palpatine made it so a different boy in his class got the position instead. Anakin vented his anger to Palpatine, that he wants to use his power to take the position. Palpatine told him that would be easy. However, he would expose his nature as a student of the dark side. He tells Anakin that power is the ability to command others to do what one pleases. People often mistake this for meaning only physical, but often manipulation through words and subtle deceits are stronger tools. Anakin took this advice on and acted swiftly. That night, whilst the boy was sleeping, he used the dark side to give him a bad dream, showing his family in danger if he stayed the class leader. At such a young age, the boy didn't know any better, and after a few days of this, the boy told his teacher he didn't want to be leader anymore, and Anakin was nominated into the position. This would be a very important lesson for Anakin in the future. When Palpatine heard the news, he was ecstatic. Anakin was learning, and Palpatine knew such events as this during childhood were pivotal for learning and growth. Anakin has the desire for power, and now the talent for it. Anakin's closest friend and greatest competitor, a girl named Dala, was nominated as runner-up to the position, second in command. In these high-class schools, competition was high, and Anakin and Dala competed relentlessly, but they both enjoyed it and each other's company. Dala was the daughter of the Senator of Onderon, and often joked to Anakin that her birth status was higher than his, making her better. But Anakin knew she was joking, and genuinely considered her a friend. Many events like the one for class leader started to play out over the years, and Palpatine was happy with Anakin's progress. His cunningness grew, but so did his raw power. We get to the year of 33 BBY, when Anakin is 8 years old. Palpatine and Plagueis decide it's time to advance Palpatine's political career and start undermining Chancellor Valorum. They cause the Yin Core uprising, facilitating a war in the Outer Rim, one they know Valorum will be too afraid to act on, accompanied by this being the advice he's receiving from his advisors, the ones who were in league with the Sith. The result of this was showing the Republic that Valorum was an unstable and weak leader, whilst Palpatine stayed close to him and continued to grow his influence in the Senate, showing himself as the future, charismatic leader of the Republic. Following the next year was the invasion of Naboo. Without the ordeal of Anakin on Tatooine, the process went smoothly. Once again, Valorum's indecisiveness to act, coupled with Palpatine manipulating Queen Amidala, the Queen he'd put into position, to call for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, which was passed, and then Palpatine was appointed into the position of Chancellor. The Sith had done it. The next day, as per their plan, Palpatine appoints Darth Plagueis, better known to the galaxy as highly influential and powerful businessman Hago Damask, into the position of co-chancellor of the Republic. Also, Darth Maul was never sent back to Naboo, since Anakin wasn't there, and thus the Sith apprentice survives. Together, Palpatine and Plagueis start formulating the Separatist movement. Palpatine was successful in recruiting Dooku, who'd recently become disillusioned with the Jedi Order and their ways. He was introduced to Hago Damask's true identity as Darth Plagueis, someone whom Dooku had met many times, but never suspected he was a Sith Lord. Together, Plagueis manipulates Sifo Dyas into the creation of the clone army on Kamino, orders Dooku to kill him to prove his loyalty, and the Confederacy of Independent Systems was in full force, and no doubt, the Clone War would follow in a decade's time. Meanwhile, a few years down the line, Anakin is 12 years old. Through his training, he's now reached the power of a Jedi Knight. Palpatine couldn't believe his progress. He's mastered all lightsaber forms, and his array of Sith techniques was growing by the day. But one thing had changed in Palpatine's mind that he didn't expect. He felt pride towards Anakin, the same pride a father would in a son. Palpatine had played the father figure in Anakin's life for so long, it had rubbed off onto him. He thought he was pretending to have those feelings as part of training Anakin, but it turns out they were developed to be real. I wouldn't call it love, but it was a deep attachment that would only continue to develop further with age. Meanwhile, Anakin was still the leader of the influential student program. He'd become closer to Dala, sharing everything with her. He wanted so badly to tell her the truth of his identity as a student of the Sith, the power that he possesses. But he knew that would undermine him and his master's grand plan, and wouldn't dare to defy him. As the years went on, his feelings towards Dala started to change from a close friend into something more. A couple more years later, as the plan of the Confederacy of Independent Systems is alive and well, with the clone army deep into development, Plagueis brought up some concerns with Palpatine. He gathered the entirety of the Sith, himself, Palpatine, Dooku and Maul together in one place. Anakin was not present, as Palpatine had been successful in hiding him from his master. Plagueis speaks with Palpatine alone, and tells him that he started to grow wary of Palpatine, that the Force doesn't settle well with him, that the dark side hints of betrayal, that his mastery over Maul and close relationship with Dooku has become a threat. Plagueis reminds Palpatine that they will rise to power together, however, demands that Palpatine himself execute Maul to prove his loyalty. Palpatine expected this, and Maul's usefulness had passed its expiry date. Palpatine tells his master, of course, he sees it no other way. But Palpatine was sick with Plagueis' words. Such cowardice is not beholden of a Sith. He's become weak in his mind, albeit his power is still useful. 3 more years pass, and the Clone War has just begun. They successfully manipulate the Jedi into finding the clone army, and the Confederacy declared war shortly after. However, this was where Palpatine decides his own individual plan must begin. The day before, he proclaimed Anakin a master of the Sith, having completed his training. His progress in the Force was now up to his own. But with this, Palpatine acted. He called for a meeting in the industrial region of Coruscant. He called in Plagueis, who walked in to see Dooku standing at one side of the room with Palpatine, and a hooded figure next to him. Plagueis asked Palpatine what the meaning of this is. What is so urgent? He was summoned here. But Palpatine responds coldly, telling Plagueis his death, that for too long, his presence in the dark side has inhibited the grand plan, their ascension to power. His obsession with the midichlorians and science casts a shadow over the dark side, that it's time to cast it aside. But Plagueis tells Sidious he is clever, manipulative, and ruthless. He has watched him build its influence, like a spider weaving a web from the shadows of Naboo to the Senate floor. He tells him he's become a true Sith, but still incomplete. Palpatine chuckles, introducing Anakin, who takes off his hood, the true apprentice of the Sith, whom together they will part the galaxy in their own image alone. Plagueis senses the power Anakin possesses, but has to hold a strong front. He asks Palpatine whether he thinks a blade or lightning can kill him. He has transcended such crude limitations, and he will bend his will with the midichlorians themselves. Palpatine steps closer, telling Plagueis to die as a god dies, broken and betrayed by his own creations. So be it, Palpatine heard back as he cast lightning at Plagueis, who caught it with his hands. Anakin ignited his crimson blade and rushed at Plagueis' side, who ignited his own to block at the last second. Plagueis fans back with the Force and starts conjuring a Force storm, whilst Palpatine and Anakin came at him. Red blades started clashing, sparks flying from Durasteel. Sidious is feral and fast, Anakin is fury and fire, whilst Plagueis is stillness and precision, already connecting to the midichlorians inside of him, trying to boost his power. A massive Force lightning throws Sidious back, but he catches himself midair, twisting and retaliating. Each blow cracked stone, each Force blast shattered the air. Plagueis summoned a crushing field of gravity, pinning Sidious down, but the apprentice countered with a burst of raw willpower, snapping through it. Behind Sidious, Anakin extended a hand, not to kill, but to drain. Dark tendrils of energy snaked from Plagueis' body, siphoning his life, his knowledge, his very essence. Plagueis' form withered, attempting to call on his midichlorians to fight back, but this was not a battle he could win against Anakin and his raw power. Plagueis' form withered as Palpatine walked closer and leaned in, eyes slight with the victory. With a flick of his wrist, he raised Palpatine's body into the air as he and Anakin threw their sabers, piercing both of his hearts as his lifeless body was cast into the shadows, forgotten. Palpatine looked over at Anakin. He was a proud father and happy it was Anakin by his side as they took the mantle of Dark Lords of the Sith. The next day, Plagueis or Hago Damask's death was reported as an assassination from the Separatists, and a massive funeral was held, which only fueled the Republic's desire for revenge. Meanwhile, as war raged on, Anakin had now graduated from school and enrolled in the Young Senators program. With this, he's assigned to shadow the Chancellor himself and spends all of his time with Palpatine, but also most importantly, exposed to being around the Jedi and Jedi Council. Anakin got to hear firsthand their dogma and arrogance, which further motivated him. His thirst for power was just as strong as Palpatine, as was their bond. He truly viewed Palpatine as his father, and knew it was only a matter of time before the galaxy was theirs. During this time, Dala was appointed as part of the Onderon Committee, working under her father, the Senator. She and Anakin were still close to each other, and snuck off when they could see each other. Their relationship had become more intimate when Anakin confessed his feelings a year earlier, which Dala no doubt reciprocated. Anakin spent every spare moment he could with her, but this became less and less as the war progressed. Palpatine was very happy with the desired effect of the war. He used it to turn the galaxy against the Jedi and blame them for the conflict. People started to see the Jedi not as the defenders of peace, but rather the enemies of it. Palpatine had warned Anakin that any day now would be the culmination of the grand plan, and to prepare accordingly. He didn't know what Palpatine meant by this, but detected it had some underlining meaning. Palpatine never mentioned it to Anakin, but of course he knew of his and Dala's relationship. He put up with it for now, as he believed it would only act as fuel to his power in the future. He recalls back to the story of Darth Malgus, whom fell in love with his slave, but eventually killed her, as she was a hindrance to his power, and the pain of her loss, having to do it himself, only fueled Malgus' power, making him one of the most feared Sith of all time. He had hoped the same for Anakin, and hinted for him to deal with her before the culmination of their plan. But Anakin had something else in mind. That night, he told Dala the truth about himself, that he's a Sith Lord, the sworn enemy of the Jedi, and behind the war the galaxy is experiencing. At first her face tightened with disbelief, a flicker of fear behind her eyes, but Anakin spoke with the same conviction that had always drawn her to him. He described the decay of the Republic, the arrogance of the Jedi, the illusion of peace that masked galaxy suffering. He didn't speak of conquest or revenge, only of order, strength, and the future they could build. She listened, felt the gravity of his words, and realized the truth. He had become something more than any senator, more than any Jedi. He was power and purpose combined, and that he loved her. With trembling hands, grasping his face, she revealed her own secret. She was pregnant. Anakin fell to his knees, overwhelmed, his heart catching up to the truth. This was the day the Force prepared him for. He told her that this was the greatest day of his life, that their child would be born into a galaxy remade. The next morning, Palpatine stood in his office, eyes fixed on the skyline when he felt it. Anakin's presence, sharper than ever, saturated with strength. The boy had ascended. Palpatine turned to him and asked quietly whether he had done what needed to be done with Dala. Anakin gave only a nod. Palpatine was satisfied. The apprentice had severed his last ties to weakness, or so he thought. The time had come. Order 66 was transmitted in secret, and the clone army attacked with ruthless precision. Across the galaxy, temples and outposts lit with fires as Jedi were struck down by the thousands. At the heart of it, the Jedi temple burned on Coruscant, its defenders overwhelmed. Anakin and Palpatine led the assault, cutting through masters and Padawans alike. They made their way through the entire temple, until not a single Jedi was left alive. In the Senate chamber, smoke still rising in front of the skyline, Palpatine stood before the stunned senators. He declared the Jedi traitors to the Republic, conspiring against peace. In the same breath, he promised safety and stability in a new order, for an empire to last 1,000 years. The chamber erupted into thunderous applause, and the Sith ruled the galaxy at last. Meanwhile, later that night, while the empire solidified and the separatist leadership was reduced to ashes by Anakin's blade, he returned home. The lights were dim, Dala waiting for him. They embraced in silence, both knowing the galaxy had changed forever, for the better. The door slid open. Palpatine entered, but instead of finding Anakin alone, he saw her, Dala, alive and well. His gaze turned to Anakin. The boy had lied, and he demanded an explanation, as his fury was barely restrained. Anakin explained to Palpatine that he had not lied, that he had dealt with Dala. He told her the truth of everything, that his power today, the fire that burned through the Jedi, wasn't born out of his hatred alone, but his love for Dala, their child, and the future he had forged. Palpatine was lost for words. He didn't know what to think. Anakin tells Palpatine that he also loves him like a father, and he knows he loves him like a son. The Sith code itself taught him, love is passion, and through passion I gain strength. Through strength I gain power. Through power I gain victory. Palpatine stood frozen, torn between rage and revelation. He had trained Anakin as a weapon, but the apprentice had become something more. He saw himself reflected in Anakin, and perhaps the boy was right. Together, father and son spoke the final line, not as Sith clinging to ancient traditions, but as lords of a reborn order. Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall free me. Palpatine remained silent for a long time. His gaze shifted between Anakin and Dala. He had lived his life by the Sith code, wielding it a blade against the galaxy, but Anakin had done something unprecedented. He had bent the code without breaking it. Where others had been consumed by love, weakened by it, Anakin had harnessed it, turned attachment into strength, turned legacy into power, and for the first time in decades, Palpatine felt something unfamiliar, awe. In that moment, he saw what Anakin truly was, not just a Sith Lord, not even merely his apprentice. Anakin was the culmination of the Sith's long journey through darkness, a being who had ascended beyond their philosophy, not by rejecting it, by evolving it. He had added to it, completing what Bane began and what all others failed to achieve. Palpatine stepped forward, laid a hand on Anakin's shoulder, and nodded once. They were no longer just survivors. They were legacy, and Anakin Skywalker was its perfection. Thanks for watching, everyone. I know this version of events took a very dark turn, but we can't have Anakin and Padme live there happily ever after every time. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and what you think of this version of Vader. Don't forget to check out Fantasy Sabers, and may the Force be with you.